Hello and welcome everyone to our virtual workshop on the future of scientific conferencing. I am Jessica Gatta, co-chair for this event, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this workshop hosted by the National Institutes of Health, Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences Research, or OBSSR, and an NIH Planning Committee with support from the Chief Officer for Scientific Workforce Diversity, or COSWD. As an OBSSR-hosted event, we require all participants to adhere to these guidelines. Uphold the professional and educational purposes of meetings by respecting the rights, views, privacy, safety, and dignity of all people. Demonstrate professionalism, consideration, and respect in their speech and actions. Keep all comments relevant to the topic. Please refrain from engaging in harassing speech or inappropriate behavior, posting insulting, obscene, discriminatory, or threatening comments, disrupting the conversation with spam or repetitive posts. Failure to adhere to these guidelines will result in removal from the event. You can refer to these guidelines at any time. They are posted on the event website. This workshop was planned by an NIH-wide planning committee with input and representation from several institutes, centers, and offices. Scientific conferencing is a vital aspect of our work as scientists. Scientific conferences and meetings provide key opportunities for training, dissemination of research, and networking. The COVID-19 pandemic led to rapid uptake of virtual approaches to scientific conferences and meetings. With this came a growing acceptance of hybrid work options, which highlights an opportunity for us to re-examine how scientific conferences are conducted. This virtual workshop will bring together diverse perspectives from multiple disciplines to explore advantages, barriers, gaps, and opportunities in the future of scientific conferencing for the behavioral and social sciences. This workshop aims to incorporate innovative approaches to showcase the potential of a virtual platform for learning, networking, and engagement. The overarching aims are to facilitate interdisciplinary communication and networking, identify cross-cutting scientific gaps regarding the role of behavioral social science factors in scientific convenings, and inform practical strategies for designing effective, engaging, and sustainable scientific conferences and meetings. Now I will hand it over to Sydney O'Connor to share workshop details.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sydney O'Connor, co-chair of this event. This workshop will take place over 3 days. Each day will highlight distinct themes as they relate to scientific conferences, meetings, and convenings. Today is workshop day 1 and will be live from now until 5 o'clock Eastern. After this opening session, we will hold 2 concurrent tracks of sessions. You can use the My Agenda function to add sessions of interest to your virtual agenda. Track 1 today will focus on themes of diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging, or DEIA-B. Track 2 will focus on environmental sustainability of scientific conferences and meetings. Tomorrow, Friday, June 7th, from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern is Engagement Day, dedicated time to attend virtual poster presentations, participate in networking opportunities, and join small group discussions led by workshop speakers and NIH staff. Next Tuesday, June 11th, is Workshop Day 2, from noon to 5 p.m. Eastern. Day 2 will also consist of 2 concurrent tracks, each featuring sessions focused on one of 2 content areas. Track 3 will focus on networking, collaboration, and scientific innovation, and Track 4 will focus on balancing participant needs and emerging technologies. Today, we are excited to highlight the theme of DEIA-B in Track 1, a greater understanding of how conferences provide spaces, either physical or virtual, for individuals of diverse backgrounds to connect, as well as the barriers that many individuals and groups face in attending scientific conferences can support a more diverse and vibrant scientific workforce and spur scientific innovation. Here's a brief preview of the content you'll find in Track 1. Track 1 will kick off with a panel discussion on cultivating inclusivity, advancing diversity and equity in scientific convenings. The second session in Track 1 is a fireside chat on creating inclusive conference environments through disability inclusion and accessibility. Also today, in Track 2, we will highlight the theme of environmental sustainability. With growing recognition of the impact of climate change on human health and well-being, this track will examine the environmental impact of scientific conferences, innovative conference formats with lower impact, and what this means for scientific advancement and academic career progression. Track 2 will begin with a panel discussion on sustainability in motion, charting a greener course for academic travel and career progression. Following this, the second session in Track 2 will focus on redefining conferences, innovative formats for sustainable engagement. Additionally, be sure to join us for the Day 1 closing session, where we will feature a plenary session with Dr. Lucy Gilson. As a reminder, you may access the agenda at any time. It's posted in the virtual auditorium and is also included in your virtual briefcase.
In addition to the content in our 4 concurrent live tracks, please take advantage of the other features of this virtual event. In the networking lounge, be sure to check out the message boards for chat prompts. You're also able to network and find matches and do one-on-one and group chats and connect on social media. Visit the poster hall where you can engage with pre-recorded materials, and please be sure to join us on Engagement Day tomorrow for some live featured poster presentations. Check out the carbon calculator that's in the top ribbon of the virtual environment. You can calculate your carbon emissions saved versus if this was an in-person workshop on the NIH campus in Bethesda, Maryland. You can view on-demand recordings that you can also access in the future. The live sessions will be posted within 24 hours, and recordings will be available for up to 1 year. A few words about navigating the virtual environment. Please view the welcome video in the virtual lobby to orient you to the virtual platform. Announcements will alert attendees to upcoming content, and virtual travel and break times have been built into the agenda. Live closed captions are also provided for each live session. Please use the Q&A function to submit questions directly to the moderator and presenter. And please use the chat to share comments and reactions to the presentation. These messages are seen by the full audience. The help desk is also staffed and available to assist with technical issues or questions. Now we would like to introduce Dr. Jane Simoni, the NIH Associate Director for Behavioral and Social Sciences Research at the NIH, and the Director of the Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences Research at the NIH. Dr. Simoni will be providing today's welcome address. Dr. Simoni, please go ahead.
And welcome to the Future of Scientific Conferencing workshop. I'm Jane Simoni, and I'm the Associate Director for Behavioral and Social Sciences Research here at the NIH, and I direct our Office for Behavioral and Social Sciences Research. Today, I want to tell you a little bit about our office and tell you why we're excited about this workshop today. So our office was started in 1995, and the mission is to enhance the impact of behavioral and social sciences research within health by identifying important BSSR projects, just like this workshop, that we should support, by developing and coordinating initiatives across the NIH with the other offices, centers, and institutes, and by integrating BSSR within the larger NIH research enterprise. Finally, we want to communicate significant findings of BSSR, both within the NIH and beyond. We envision a world in which the synergistic integration of the behavioral and social sciences with biomedical research will lead to accelerated scientific discovery, effective treatment and health promotion interventions, and equitable implementation strategies that will improve the health for all. We have a small team, but it's of myself as a director, Janine Simmons as deputy director, other section chiefs and associate director, and 25 staff that are really the engine of what we do. Because we have a small budget and a small staff at NIH, we rely on the dedication, the initiative, and the creativity of the staff to build relationships across NIH and to elevate the status of behavioral and social science and improve its impact in the research that we do. In terms of our strategic priorities, we're coming out with a new plan this year, which talks about in terms of research capacity in our operations. In terms of research, synergistic inquiry is one of our priorities. We want to combine the biomedical research with the behavioral to get the most impactful results. We also combine basic and applied behavioral and social sciences. In terms of investigations and research, we want to see innovation in terms of the measures we use, the methods that we employ, and then the statistical analyses that we use to promote the research. And finally, as our director says, our work is not done until patient health is improved. So we want to see implementation and impact by accelerating the sustained adoption of our findings into practice and policy. In terms of capacity, we want to develop and diversify the BSSR workforce so that, for instance, here at NIH, we have experts in each of the institutes able to promote behavioral and social science research to facilitate the aims of the institutes. And finally, in terms of operation, we uphold values of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, both within the office and in the research partnerships that we develop. And with these partnerships, we want to develop them not only within the institutes, but across and outside NIH, so they will be equitable and bi-directional. And finally, enhance communication among scientists and with the public. Across all these priorities, our cross-cutting theme is health equity. We want to make sure that every individual has the opportunity for optimal health. Finally, what I'm excited for today in this workshop is some key themes and topics. First of all, increasing engagement and participation in the research conference enterprise, innovation, creativity, and idea generation about how we can best collaborate as scientists in conferences and meetings. Social connections and networking are key in our daily lives and our research as well, and we hope to find a forum in which these can be optimized. Collaboration, team science, interdisciplinary work is important, and we have to find a way to be able to do that. Environmental sustainability is a value that we'd like to uphold. And then, as I said before, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging are important. Finally, the lessons we learn from behavioral and social sciences research, we hope to be able to build better science, better scientific communicating, and better scientific conferencing. I'll end with a QR code that you can go to our website and find out what else we do at the Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences here at the research. Meanwhile, I hope you enjoy the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Simone, for that welcome. Now we would like to hand it over to Dr. Jean Shin, Deputy Director of the Chief Officer for Scientific Workforce Diversity Office at the National Institutes of Health. Dr. Shin will be moderating the opening keynote presentation. Dr. Shin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Jessica, and hello, everybody, and welcome to the Future of Scientific Conferencing workshop and the opening keynote presentation by Dr. Marie Bernard, Chief Officer for Scientific Workforce Diversity, or COSWD, here at the National Institutes of Health. My name is Jean Shin. I am Deputy Director of the COSWD office here, and I'm also a member of the Future of Scientific Conferencing Workshop Planning Committee. In this next session, we will hear a keynote presentation by Dr. Bernard, followed by a moderated discussion, including questions that are submitted by the audience. At any time in the session, you may use the Q&A function to submit your questions for the speaker. You may also use the chat function to share your thoughts and engage in discussion. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our keynote speaker. Marie Bernard, MD, is the NIH Chief Officer for Scientific Workforce Diversity, or COSWD. As the COSWD, she leads NIH thought regarding the science of scientific workforce diversity, assuring that the full range of talent is accessed to promote scientific creativity and innovation. Dr. Bernard co-led the development of the fiscal years 2023 to 27 NIH-wide Strategic Plan for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility, or DEIA, and is working on its implementation. She's also a co-chair of the advisory committee to the NIH Director Working Group on Diversity, the NIH Steering Committee Working Group on DEIA, and the NIH UNITE initiative to identify and address any structural racism that may exist within NIH and throughout the biomedical and behavioral workforce. Dr. Bernard came to NIH in 2008 to serve as the Deputy Director of the NIH National Institute on Aging, or NIA, after a successful career as an academic geriatrician. She was selected to serve as the COSWD after a national search in May 2021. Dr. Bernard earned her AB from Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania and her MD from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. She trained in internal medicine at Temple University Hospital in Philadelphia, where she served as chief resident. Additionally, she received training through the Association of American Medical Colleges Health Services Research Institute, the Geriatric Education Center of Pennsylvania, and the Wharton School Executive Development Program. Dr. Bernard, I'm happy to turn over the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Gene, and I'm really happy to talk with all of you today. The future of scientific conferencing, from my perspective, is what encapsulates the mission of the COSWD. And as they say, picture is worth 1,000 words. I'm going to share a picture that shows why this position exists and how it is valued at NIH.
It is smooth and sharp. It is a spear.
No, it is a wall.
It is most definitely a fan, a huge fan.
Science implicitly relies on the contributions of different perspectives. The mission of the Office of the Chief Officer for Scientific Workforce Diversity is to bring varied points of view into the work of the National Institutes of Health and the field of biomedical and behavioral science research. A study of 2.5 million scientific papers shows that people representing distinct backgrounds publish more widely cited research, generating improved science, which leads to greater discoveries. Because great minds think differently, but together, different minds accomplish even greater things.
So as I said, a picture is worth 1,000 words. That gives you, in a very brief summary, why it is this position exists, why it is that we think that diverse perspectives are important in science, but there's a lot of data that backs it up. In fact, we have an article in Nature Medicine that Larry Tabak, the principal deputy director, Treva Hopkins-LaBoy, Alfred Johnson, and I authored 3 years ago now, that talks about the fact that the sorts of problems we're trying to address in biomedical and behavioral research are like describing the elephant sightlessly, as illustrated in the video. You have to come at it from a lot of different perspectives, and a perspective is informed by lots of different things. Geography, where you grew up, where you're working, that sort of thing. Discipline, yes. Sex, race, ethnicity, whether or not you have a disability, whether or not you grew up in a socioeconomically challenging circumstance, and all sorts of other things, your gender identity, etc. So all of those things contribute to the way that you come at problems, and we need all of those perspectives in order to foster creativity and innovation in science. If you are interested in delving into that further, if you go to diversity.nih.gov, there's a summary of a scientific workforce diversity seminar that we held now 2 years ago. We brought forward leading experts in the field to talk about the data. Richard Freeman, the third listed presenter there, is from that Freeman and Wong study that was cited in the video, where they looked at some 2.5 million articles in the scientific literature and looked at whether the authors being similar in background seemed to translate into impact factor of the journal in which the article was published and the frequency with which it was cited, and very nicely demonstrated that the more heterogeneous the authors, the higher the impact factor, the more frequently the article was cited. And lots of other data that's shared there. Dr. Shirley Tillman, past president of Princeton University, was a reactant. So there are proceedings, there's a video cast, there are the slides, a great resource if you want to know more about why it is that we're interested in these sorts of issues. From our viewpoint, inclusion means excellence, and it means better science. But how do you do that? If that's really important, how do we foster that? Well, we also, a group of us NIHers, wrote in Nature Communications now a couple of years ago about inclusive excellence. Dr. Janine Clayton, Director of the Office of Research and Women's Health, Kelly Tenhagen, Carrie Molnitz, and I developed this specifically to talk about the inclusion of women, but it's really applicable broadly. In order to get that inclusion of the wide variety of perspectives that you need demonstrated leadership support. You need action-oriented accountability. You need cultures of inclusion. You need research interventions and best practices. And you need enhanced flexibility and options. And what we will be talking about, or what I'll talk about subsequently, and what you'll be talking about throughout this conference, is enhanced flexibility options. Let's go back down memory lane to talk a little bit about those enhanced options. I don't think anyone can forget where they were in the winter of 2020 when SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 was declared a worldwide pandemic. It really disrupted all of our lives. And as you recall, we were really working hard to develop a vaccine. We had the Chinese scientists who put the genetic sequence of the coronavirus online. We had Moderna delivering the first vaccine doses by February 24th. We had the FDA authorizing the vaccine for emergency use by the end of that calendar year. Just really rapid development. And people were really focused on that part of the pandemic. But another part of the pandemic that we were able to see is that we had to go into a virtual environment. And in fact, going into the virtual environment seemed to have some benefits that were unanticipated. It's the silver lining of the pandemic. These are data from an article in Nature Biotechnology that was published online December 2021 in hard copy in 2022 by Wu and colleagues that looked at participation in the Research in Computational Molecular Biology meeting 2019, that's the in-person, versus 2020 in the throes of the pandemic. And you see the participation in general, the participation of people of African ancestry, participation of people who have Hispanic backgrounds, really a marked increase. They say that they had a 900% increase in participation in their conference. Another way of looking at it was looking at several meetings that took place in 2020. BIOC is the Bioconductor Annual Meeting. BCC is the Bioinformatics Community Conference. ISMB is the Intelligent Systems for Molecular Biology Conference. And RECOM, again, the Research in Computational Molecular Biology. And all of them had extraordinary numbers of people to participate in their conferences. And real mixture of males and females, of people from Europe, Asia, and the African continent, things that they had never seen before, leading to a perception that there could be some benefit to this virtual environment. Here at NIH, we have had in the past regional conferences sponsored by the Office of Extramural Research to make outreach. And this should be read from the right to left rather than left to right in this case. So in 2019, the conference included some 950 participants, and they thought that was wonderful. It was an in-person meeting. But in 2020, when it was a virtual meeting, there were 22,000 participants, and in 2021, 24, approaching 25,000 participants, with all 50 states represented, as well as Puerto Rico, 118 countries represented. They were really impressed by this. They looked at the data a little bit further to make sure that people were actually, they registered, that they said that they were online. They were able to look at how engaged people were in terms of following up, looking at what was online, the length of time people looked at things, the total views, leading to the conclusion that this is a good intervention. You're making much broader outreach. And when they evaluated satisfaction with it in every realm, overall usefulness, experience, value of topics, agenda, online delivery, session options, they found that on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being top notch, everything was skewing towards a 5. So they were so impressed with this that they went to the extent of making all of their regional outreach meetings virtual now, as opposed to the in-person meetings that they used to have. We similarly in the COSWD office were impressed with the egalitarianness of having things virtual, and made the statement in February 2022 that at least through the end of that calendar year, all of our outreach would be virtual. And we have been so impressed with it that we have continued with that. We have a scientific workforce diversity seminar series. We saw a slide from that earlier, where which has been very successful. In fiscal year 21, our fiscal year goes from October 1 through September 30th. So October 1 of 2021 through September 30th of 2022, with 4 offerings, we had 2,500 participants. In fiscal year 22, we had 2,500 participants with 3 offerings. In fiscal year 23, a little bit less, but about 2,300 participants. And this fiscal year, with only 2 offerings thus far, some 1,600 participants. So we're on track for meeting the numbers that we've had in prior years. And there's no way we could have had that sort of outreach, having an in-person meeting with our small office of only 12 people. So I'm going to ask you to help us to get up to our number for fiscal year 24 with attendance at our conference that's coming up on June 20th, virtual conference, looking at how our institutions transform to foster cultures of inclusive excellence. We have a star-studded cast. Dr. Allison Gammy, Director of the Division of Training Workforce at the National Institute of General Medical Sciences, will talk about the Diversity Program Consortium that's been supported by NIH for the last decade. Dr. Leah Becca-Michelle from Rochester Institute of Technology is going to talk about what they have done to foster inclusive environments for deaf and hard of hearing populations. RIT was one of the 10 institutions that won in the competition for DEIA prize that NIH gave earlier this year. And we thought that the innovations that they are making in that setting would be of benefit to an audience that's interested in inclusive excellence. Dr. Elizabeth O'Feely from Morehouse School of Medicine and head of the Coordination and Evaluation Center for the Faculty Institutional Recruitment for Sustainable Transformation Initiative will talk about advances there. That's an experiment that NIH is supporting. The commitment is for at least 5 years, up to 9 years, to see whether bringing in groups of scientists who have an interest and a track record in DEIA can lead to success, because you're supporting them with mentoring and paying attention to the environment, and whether that leads to a greater diversity of scientists ultimately who are in the science among the professoriate who are getting R01 funding from NIH. And Dr. Blanton Tolbert from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute is going to talk about the Freeman Lebowski Scholars Program, which is another cohort training program that pays attention to inclusion and environment. So I think it'll be a very informative session. I hope that you'll be able to join us. The QR code should be able to take you to the registration site. So I've shared data that in large conferences, professional organization conferences, it seems that virtual conferencing led to more participation. We've had that experience at NIH, certainly with the Office of Extramural Research and with the COSWD team. Let's talk about advantages and disadvantages of virtual conferencing, because it's great, but it does have its downsides. From the standpoint of advantages, and I must give credit to the Office of Behavioral and Social Science Research. Back in 21-22, when we were talking internally at NIH about virtual conferencing and what should the future be, should we maybe make a statement like Dr. Collins made a few years back about Manos, that we would not participate in a conference if there weren't virtual options. So we thought long and hard about this, and OBSSR did a very nice review of the literature as it stood at that time, and are able to bring forward the fact that virtual conference options foster diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've shared data with you along those lines. There'll be more. It decreased environmental impact, and there's a whole track that'll be examining that at this meeting. It was perceived as effective in the data that was available thus far, and I'll be interested in what will be presented today and at the next session. It allowed you to better measure attendance and engagement in conference activities. At least, did they click in? Now that we're back to in-person conferencing as well, I can say in my other life as a geriatrician, when I went to our professional meetings, I often didn't get into the session because I was spending all my time talking to colleagues. So this is a means of more engagement from that perspective. And the data persists and becomes a legacy that you can refer to. As I mentioned, we have the videos of all of our scientific workforce diversity seminars posted on our website. Anyone can look at it at any time. There is the potential to create micro and virtual communities, and I think everyone will get a chance to get a little more experience with that during this conference. I'm sure you've had it at other conferences. It reduces or avoids discrimination and harassment present in in-person conferences. So this is something that we at NIH have been very concerned about and have a lot of things in place for reporting discrimination and harassment, but unfortunately it still happens in some settings, and being in the virtual setting limits that. And presuming the individual has appropriate accommodations on their computer, it allows greater access for individuals with disabilities. There are cost savings associated. When we were talking within NIH, comparing what it took to do a virtual meeting versus flying everyone in, doing hotels, et cetera, there are definitely cost savings associated with as well. And for the individual, there are the cost savings, time of getting there, making arrangements for family, et cetera, that are invaluable. What are the disadvantages? Well, there's uncertainty regarding the effectiveness of in-person versus virtual interactions in supporting scientific collaboration and creativity. And that was a big sticking point in our discussion at the Institute and Center Director level. Everyone recognizes that those informal conversations after a presentation, the breakfasts, the lunches, the dinners, the receptions, those are really valuable in fostering networking and moving things forward. From an egalitarian standpoint, those who can't afford to do those things are at a disadvantage. So, it's weighing risk versus benefits. It requires a stable internet connection. That's the reason my background is my home library rather than my office. It's a shame. My office is on the NIH main campus, but sometimes I don't have connectivity like I need to have it. So that's an issue. It can be exhausting to video conference. There have been a lot of studies coming out talking about the issue of, you don't have the usual visual cues, you're hyper attentive and much closer to individuals on the video than would otherwise be the case. You see yourself all the time. You can hide yourself. That can be helpful, but it can be exhausting. Technology platforms may have a learning curve. Thus far, I'm finding the Lab Group platform very user-friendly, and I understand it has a number of features that will be beneficial as we move forward, but every platform can be a little different. And there can be time zone differences. As we in the COSWD office, we're doing a collaborative offering with United Kingdom group, a United Kingdom group. We tried to schedule things so the people in the UK would be able to participate. And then I got an email from a colleague in Hawaii said, well, this is going to be like 3 o'clock in the morning for us. And so that's challenging. But on the other hand, again, as you can tell, I'm pro virtual conferencing. It's been kind of inhumane for us to have meetings on the NIH campus that start at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we fly in our colleagues from the West Coast or further just the day before. So again, risk versus benefit. And there's the increased cognitive load that we mentioned earlier. The issue of foregoing that situational experience, those informal encounters and chats, yes. So maybe you can get the best of both worlds by hybrid conferencing, part virtual, part in person. And there are advantages and disadvantages to that. Some of the strengths of hybrid conferencing: attendees can choose the format that works best for them, increasing access and broader participation. Because of the virtual appointment, everyone can watch and view anything later if they aren't able to view things synchronously. And collaborations can span in-person and virtual attendees, bringing people together who might not otherwise be brought together. There are limitations, however. Social interactions between the in-person and virtual attendees can be difficult to facilitate. You really need a good, attentive moderator to facilitate those sorts of things. And if the ratio of in-person to virtual attendees is not balanced, in-person attendees could end up feeling like they're addressing a nearly empty room, or vice versa. If most people are in person and only a few who are hybrid, they can really feel left out. And venues could potentially be less likely or motivated to address structural challenges of attending in-person conferences if attendees have a virtual option, such as childcare and travel costs. Again, we at NIH expect childcare to be provided. And I don't think I've yet seen that this is a problem, but hopefully it will not be one. So, what do we need to do going forward to get a better handle on this? Because I've only touched on the surface, and I think the conversations here will address a lot of this, but let me just share with you some questions for consideration that came from the conversations at the Institute and Center Directors meetings. And I particularly want to give credit to my colleagues among the Institute and Center Directors who contributed to this. I'll see how good my memory is. Richard Hodis, Director of the National Institute on Aging; Michael Chang, Director of the National Eye Institute; Rena D'Souza, Director of the National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research; and I'm forgetting all my other colleagues who contributed, so my apologies to all. Lindsay Criswell from the National Institute of Allergy, not NIAMS. Okay. Questions for consideration. Understanding and mitigating the negative intrapersonal effects of video conferencing, i.e. Zoom fatigue. And hopefully maybe someone will be talking about that today. What human-centered design approaches can be done to address challenges associated with social interactions in a virtual environment, align attendee goals with conference platform functionalities and features, and promote effective engagement. That's a really important question if this is going to continue to be a significant part of our lives. What qualitatively can we find about the perceived benefits of virtual conference attendance? And can we systematically compare attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors associated with conference attendance amongst both virtual and in-person attendees across disciplines? So these are the questions that the NIH Student Center Directors considered a couple of years ago. I know that much of this will be addressed during this conference, and I really welcome the discussion. So I will stop at that point and answer any questions that might be there.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bernard, for this very comprehensive presentation. Covered a lot of ground and did so in an excellent fashion. We're going to move into a bit of a moderated discussion for the few minutes that we have remaining, and there are a couple of questions that have shown up in the chat. I'm sorry, in the Q&A. And so if it's okay, I'll read those to you and get your initial reactions. First of all, I wanted to go ahead and take care of the first one that showed up, which was, is the COSWD video publicly available? And I can answer that and say, absolutely it is. If you go to diversity.nih.gov, which is shown on the slide right now, Dr. Bernard mentioned that before, scroll down to about the middle of the page, you'll see a link to play that video for sure. The first question for you, Dr. Bernard, is one of the issues that people often mention about virtual meetings is any associated cost. How did the meetings that you described that have gone virtual manage to handle all those participants without raising the cost to a prohibitive level?
And it's a great question. And obviously I'm talking from an NIH-centric viewpoint, and NIH has always paid for travel and accommodations for speakers for our meetings, et cetera. And so for us, it's a cost savings because we don't spend as much money bringing people in, putting them up in hotels, et cetera. But there's no question that the phenomenon that at least I was observing was that for professional organizations, they had the cost of buying a platform that would facilitate the interactions that they would like to have, and the cost of continuing to bring together all of the professionals and the other organizations that are necessary for vibrant conversation. And in some cases, the registration fee for the conference was as expensive, if not more expensive, than when one attended in person. So it is a challenge, and it'll be very interesting, again, to hear some of the subsequent conversations about this and how things evolve over the course of time.
Okay. We have time for maybe just one more question, and that is someone had written, I also value virtual conferences as it allows for me to participate in activities like this conference. But I also wonder about the further enabling of people staying within their own echo chambers if we don't interact in person with people different from us in gatherings like professional conferences. So, I think it's really more of a statement than a question, but if you have a reaction to that.
I do have a reaction to that because I think that we have an opportunity, even though we're beyond the height of the pandemic, we have an opportunity to look at ways of fostering those sorts of interactions virtually and truly being equitable. I have a lot of gray hair, so I've done a lot of scientific meetings. And what I observe is that the interactions tend to be among people who really already know each other or who are already in the orbit of those individuals. And I would love to see a world where we can develop networking sessions where people are randomly put together as opposed to building on already existing networks and seeing what comes of that. There's no question there needs to be that opportunity for less than this standard presentation that I'm providing, an opportunity for formal conversation. But I think that the viewpoint that you're getting to talk to a lot of different people, I'd like to see the data that really shows that that's truly the case, because I'm not sure.
Okay. And then a final question that just came in. Do you find that virtual conferences allow for a greater pool of speakers?
That's a great question. Absolutely. When we've been putting together our scientific workforce diversity seminar, we've been able to get people from, across the pond, across the Pacific, because it is virtual and they didn't have to deal with the issues of travel. So that is another factor. Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Bernard. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for this first session, but I did want to first, express our appreciation to Dr. Bernard for, providing a wonderful keynote to kick us off here, and also to say that the next set of concurrent sessions will begin at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and in track one of the next session, as was stated before, will focus on cultivating inclusivity, advancing diversity and equity in scientific convenings. And actually, Dr. Bernard will be the moderator for that session. And then in track two, the next session will focus on sustainability in motion, charting a greener course for academic travel and career progression. And the moderator there will be Sydney O'Connor. To join the session of your choice, navigate to the auditorium and select the track that you would like to attend. Again, thank you all for joining. And this concludes this session, and we'll see you all at 1 o'clock.